It has now been February, March, April, and we are now in May. So just over 3.5 months since the Ram temple was inaugurated in Ayodhya. We are in the midst of the heaviest political high-stakes season imaginable. The Prime Minister is conducting the biggest rally in Ayodhya, one of the biggest of his electoral campaigns. Obviously, this is about translating actions into votes. There's a little bit of politics in the mix. Yes, it's equally true that senior leadership of the Congress has not been able to go to Ayodhya, show up at the inauguration. Akhilesh has not found time. Arvind Kejriwal did find time to go there, or the inclination to go there. So the politics is going to take place, and that's important. We are in political season. Politics is important because, that's what decides future governance and what happens and what we want to happen. But I just want to take a pause for the cause in the middle of political season to now discuss the actual ground impact of what happens when we do things, what can change if we approach things differently. Let's put this up on your screen. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2019, albeit slightly before COVID, there were roughly about 3.4 lakh people visiting. This is before the Supreme Court verdict on the Ram Mandir. 3.4 lakh people visiting Ayodhya. In 2022, right before the Shilanyas took place, okay, so this is, that figure rose from 3.4 lakh to 2.4 crore. Okay? Now remember, this is towards the end of COVID. Now have a look at what happens after that. That figure then skyrockets to 5.7 crore after the Shilanyas took place, which is just the building started. And in the first 4 months of 2024, so this is January 22nd to present date, or till the end of April, at the rate of 100,000 plus per day, 1.4 crore people have visited the Ram temple in Ayodhya. Now, if you juxtapose that over the next 8 months for the year, you're going to once again hit that 4.5-5 crore people mark. Now, obviously, in the initial phases, you can argue that there is a lot more people who want to visit, and that might die down. Or you can argue that once the infrastructure and everything else improves, this number will forever keep on increasing. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's do some back of the envelope calculation. Let's assume that an individual who is traveling to Ayodhya and spends a couple of days there is going to spend 5,000-10,000 rupees, okay, in terms of prasad they'll buy and their stay and their khane ka kharcha. Some people will spend a lot more, some people will spend a lot less, but let's assume that the average figure is 10,000 rupees. At that rate, you're talking about a yearly injection into the GDP of that city and that region of 54,000 crores. 500,000 crores of injection is going to happen just from the visitors coming. Forget the infrastructural upgrades and all the other, which is capital infrastructure, just people attending. Now, this has already had an impact on collections. And the CM has said that a notable increase of 19% in the GST collections of Uttar Pradesh. The Uttar Pradesh GST collections have gone up by 1/5 in 1 year. And the CM says that a significant contribution has come from Ayodhya. So have a look at that. About 10,000 crores in April 2023, and by April 2024, about 12.3 thousand crores. So almost 20% jump in GST collections, which means that the exchequer of UP is already benefiting, at least in some part, from the boost in visitors in Ayodhya. Now, let's look at the figures of people who are traveling there. Okay? Now, we looked at the overall figure. How does this compare? We have already surpassed in Ayodhya, Tirumala, which sees about 50,000 to 100,000 people per day. Of course, Kedarnath, much more complicated trip to take, so it only sees about 3,000 visitors per day. Badrinath also something similar. Vaishno Devi has about 20,000 odd visitors per day. Ayodhya is currently sitting at near about that 1.25, 1.5 lakh visitors per day mark. How does this compare to the rest of the world? Makkah, Medina during the Hajj sees about 100,000 people. During Ramadan, during the Hajj, sees about 100,000 people per day visiting. St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican in Rome, about 50,000 visitors per day. The Vatican itself sees about 20,000 visitors in addition to that. The Wailing Wall, which is the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem, sees about 80, 90, 100,000 visitors coming in. So Ayodhya is already, within 4 months, the number one religious tourism destination in the world as per these figures. Now, there are times when more people go to particular areas, weather and all these things matter, okay? So you can argue that in summer with vacations on, it might increase. You can argue because of the high heat, it might decrease. We will find out, but we'll get an annual average soon. But as things stand, as of April, the most visited religious tourism destination in the world. Okay? Now, in 2014, ladies and gentlemen, if you wanted to pick up a property, okay, in Ayodhya, the rates were around 400 rupees a square foot. Okay? In 2019, that had doubled. In 5 years, it had doubled to more than 1,000 rupees a square foot. In some cases, quadrupled to 2,000 rupees a square foot. Currently, that has doubled and tripled yet again to 4,000 to 6,000 rupees a square foot. So the property rates, both for rental and for buying a plot or buying a flat, okay, has gone up by 10 to 15x. So for the people who owned a shop, for the people who had a small flat, for the people who had a small motel, the people who had a small guest house, the people who had a house there, those people's net worth has increased, because property generally is, for all of us, is the biggest asset we hold, okay? Car is after that, right? The property owners there, their asset base, their net worth has increased not by a few percentage points, by 10x, 15x. Now, this is not true exactly in every locality, in every place, but that's an overall picture. Now, public transportation, we are now seeing 340 buses per day plying to Ayodhya. There are 10 trains arriving per day into Ayodhya, and 8 flights are now landing in Ayodhya, even though the airport and rail station upgradation leaves a lot to be desired. Ladies and gentlemen, aside from the politics and the Hindu and the Muslim and the Ram and the piety, I just want you to absorb all of this has happened, and in 4 months, as a country, despite the challenges, despite elections, okay, there has not been any report that has come to our knowledge, and obviously we're paying attention to what's happening in Ayodhya, that there has been bhagdad, mismanagement, rioting, chaos, confusion, pandemonium. It's all going off pretty smoothly. In fact, no news in this case is good news. Nothing has happened. Everything going smoothly is good news. And remember, the temple completion is still underway and the facilities are still being built. So, best guess says that this is not the peak, that there is some time to go. Let's open up this conversation. Himanshu Bhatt is with us, Gendra Kapoor joining us, Monica Verma is with us, and Gautam Mukherjee is joining us as well. Gautamji, let me begin with you, because I know we are in political season. Obviously, we have to discuss whether this benefits a Narendra Modi, does this help a Yogi Adityanath, who do we credit, why did Rahul Gandhi not go and see? I know those things are important. But just on the sheer brass tacks for the people living there and visiting there, what do you make of these figures?
they're stupendous. I didn't hear you talk of Banaras, but I can only think of one rival. One rival to Ayodhya would be Banaras in terms of sheer numbers. Of course, Banaras is still a work in progress. Some work has been done, some work remains. It is the oldest city in the world, the oldest religious place in the world. Ayodhya, in terms of its history, is just as hoary, and it is entirely a matter that is assuming gigantic proportions in propelling the GDP of UP, which Yogi Adityanath wants to take to 1 trillion as soon as possible.
Okay, so let me give you the figure, sir. The figure for Banaras is about 5 to 6 crore visitors per year.
Yeah. So there you have it.
For people watching this abroad, that's 50 to 60 million people visiting every year. Yeah, finish your thought, Gautamji.
Yeah, so this is profound, and I think the Modi government has tapped into the greatest tourist potential of India, which is indeed pilgrimages and religious tourism. It has always been there, but it has been neglected. The facilities were inferior, and now this is being rectified. Ayodhya is a complete makeover. It's not just the temple, it's the entire city, the infrastructure leading to it, the housing, hotels, everything. Now, this is something of a template. Of course, it's in the plains and it makes it much easier than many of the dhams,
yes,
which are up in the mountains. But even then, the possibilities are enormous. And any other form of tourism, which is somewhat dependent on people coming in from abroad, can be dwarfed, not just in terms of what it can do within the country with all the trains and planes and so on, but also in terms of sheer numbers, as you pointed out, in terms of visitors. But let us say if a Thailand gets 30 million people coming to it a year, how many more can come within India to each of these places, particularly Ayodhya and Banaras, and many of the temple towns in the south of India. Ujjain.
Okay,
You know,
let's be practical, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a Punjabi Hindu. Okay, I have been to St. Peter's because who hasn't heard of the Sistine Chapel, and you look up and you see all the paintings by Michelangelo. Okay, now I don't have to per se be a Catholic, okay, to just marvel at the historicity, the religiosity, the culture, the tradition, okay, the stories. I've been to the Wailing Wall, okay, I'm not Jewish. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is also, if you remember, right there next to the Temple of Solomon on the Dome of the Rock. You have to be Muslim to enter the mosque, but you know, I've stood at its door. I just want you to think about it, okay, of the primary religions in the world, and these are some of the biggest. The Hajj, one of the biggest religious movements of people for 800 years, okay, 900 years. In the span of 4 months, the number of visits to Ayodhya has exceeded all of these, in some cases, them combined, okay. Now, Himanshu, but we can argue that, okay, obviously, this has just happened. It's something new. There's a lot of curiosity. This is a one-time thing for everyone. And initially, the numbers will be very high. But after that, they'll dwindle down and it'll just become a routine stabilization. Or you can argue that this is just the beginning. Once the infrastructure improves, the airport improves, the train stations, the buses, the hotels, the roads all become better, the sky is the limit. Which way do you stand?
I stand with, with the infrastructural improvement, it will improve. The basic reason for that is, this has come about with a lot of euphoria generation. from the time of the demolition of the mosque, we have been thinking and dreaming, and people have been totally divided in this country. One goes on one side, other goes on other side. But everyone was keen in knowing whether the Ram temple could come up or not. And when it happens, and when you can see that physical structure being put there, that wish list, of the living human being, a living Indian man or a woman, everyone's wish list, there is Ayodhya. Those who want to go in Goa also want to go to Ayodhya first. See, that's the best part of it. And that's why you are seeing these fact numbers. 1.34 crores or 1.4 crores is not a joke in 4 months' time. Some people really marvel, why this is happening. But that is that inherent emotional connect. Everyone was dying to see, whether in my lifetime, whether I will be able to see Ram temple being connected or not. That's an emotional issue. And it's a different thing, the party, whichever is the political party that goes with it, benefits out of it. And that simmering undercurrent will go on and on and on. And I'll go a step further and say, not only Ayodhya, that 250 square kilometers of UP's, Ayodhya, Kashi, Mathura, full entire stretch, when developed fully, will be the biggest pilgrimage cum religious tourism center in the world. I'm willing to stick my neck out and say, and it will contribute to about 20% of UP's GDP, which will help UP in attaining that 1 trillion mark.
Okay.
Probably the first in the country.
Okay, so anybody's watching, so anybody watching this telecast, when I graduated from school 21 years ago, okay, every time we used to go out and play in our field, right in the heart of Delhi, in Connaught Place, okay, there was a building we used to look at, Khandar building, okay. Khandar building, why? And in most cases, a lot of places, you go to Chandni Chowk, you'll see Khandar Havelis, beautiful structures, okay. Khandar because of property dispute. झगड़े चली जा रहे हैं, one generation, second generation, third generation, fourth generation, cousins fighting, brothers fighting, sisters fighting, okay? The property dispute doesn't end, and all you create is a ruin, okay? And that's all there is. And when a property dispute ends, one way or the other, to some form of balance, whatever can be found, generally, you hope that it has happened because of reconciliation and arbitration. But okay, fine, it's the courts who have to eventually adjudicate. So be it. But when a property dispute ends, it is to the betterment of the entire family. The backbiting, the complaining, the brothers not speaking to each other, the families disowning each other, all of that becomes easier. You can develop something, and some economic value, maybe some national value can derive from it. So let me get Monica ji into this conversation. Monica ji, now, as we are seeing a development, now I know there's politics to it, there's religiosity to it, but quintessentially, do you see a place emerging which is a contributor to India's economic growth, India's economic progress, which is a contributor to creating a better environment? And of course, I'm a middle class person. I really wish today that in 2013 I'd bought a, 200 square yard plot in Ayodhya. And I would be really, really thrilled with my investment right now. But who would have thought in 2012, 2013 that we'll see this in our lifetimes? So is it, aside from the politics, is it a beneficial impact that we are seeing?
I think already, if we look around, whether it's Ayodhya or it is the other temple towns, I have been to Ujjain, and if you look at the Mahakaleshwar temple, all the shops in that area, they're not divided on the basis of religion.
Yeah.
So many people who belong to the other religion, maybe who are not even Hindu, they have set up their shops there, they sell flowers, they sell prasad, and not just, Mahakaleshwar. If you go to Mathura, you go to Vrindavan, all these places are full of, economic stories, the stories of economic successes. And that pie has been shared equally with people from different religions. So I think when it comes to Ayodhya, it definitely has a lot of significance for Hindus because it's about civilizational resurgence. It's about symbol of, Hinduism coming alive after a number of centuries, after a lot of persecution. But then if you look at Uttar Pradesh economy, a large section of that state has Muslims as its, members. And let it be the moment of, moving on from the past, moving on from the troubled history. How about that 5 acres of land that the court has given be developed into something more inclusive? Rather than, the Mandir standing where it is, and then that mosque, the area that has been given by the court, becoming an example or a symbol of how, a mosque was demolished in order for the Mandir to come up. How about creating a narrative that can synthesize two different communities into in some sort of peace, in some sort of, co-development, shared existence and coexistence?
Monica ji, one of the oldest mosques in India is perhaps the second or third mosque probably built in the world, is in Kerala. So yes, you're absolutely right. If a grand temple can be built in UAE, I can't think of anything better. That the Grand Masjid also comes up in Ayodhya. I've interviewed twice on this channel in the last few months the people who are involved in the committee that's building the temple, to figure out what the progress is, what the designs are, what their plans are, and what kind of fundraising that they need to do. You're right. Nothing would be better. Okay, but the question then becomes, and Yogendra ji, and I gave a personal example. Okay, because I'm not Catholic, okay, but obviously Rome is a tourism destination where they had the pagan temples of 2,000 years ago, of Jupiter and whatnot, of Venus, okay, is culturally, architecturally, in terms of preservation, is very well done. It's something that you can really experience, and of course there's something to marvel in the Sistine Chapel. So have we at least started the process that this is not just for Hindus, that people will come to this place because of the significance it holds in global history?
Right, Rishabh. First thing I would like to say is that the economic benefits that may arise out of religious tourism has been a late realization in this country. We always had religious places in India, whether it is Badrinath, Kedarnath, Golden Temple, Varanasi, but then these were never an area of focus by the government. But what has suddenly changed? What I'll say is that the first and most important thing that this government, and for this major credit should go to the government of Uttar Pradesh, that they have been able to develop infrastructure which is visible on all fronts, whether it is land transport, air transport. And one needs to understand that this is the first step, in terms of creation of trust between the travelers who may intend to visit. And we need to understand that the potential of this is that once the government does this first step of government expenditure, and then how they market that, product or, the nature of services, that is how that first step results in the other three components of our GDP, which is the private investment, the consumption, and the net foreign exchange that will arise or get created for our country. You see, Indians are already among top 10 travelers in the world. And I see a huge potential in this regard, that it will not be only Indians from within the country who will intend to travel to this place. It will be our NRIs. It will be foreign tourists who will also intend to see this as one of the top pilgrimage places in the world, so which will ultimately result in the creation of foreign exchange. So I see it as a great, opportunity for India that it's ultimately going to benefit our GDP.
Okay, so let me get back to Gautam Mukherjee. Gautam Mukherjee, now let's not kid ourselves. Yes, there was a temple committee that was supervising the construction. And yes, they were in a bit of a rush because they wanted to time it to a couple of months before the elections. Okay, so let's not be naive and say this is exactly what was going on. Okay, that it was indeed Yogi Adityanath as chief minister who was probably deeply involved in the personal supervision of how the progress was being made. In fact, in the run-up to the inauguration, we saw him literally there every day, checking out which patthar is where and what is being cleaned up and which gantry has been put everywhere. So now, Yogi Adityanath, who has in the past been known that he is a guy from a mutt. Okay, that's his claim to fame. He's a Gorakhpur mutt guy, nice fellow, but okay, he's a Hindu fellow. Okay, not necessarily the administrator with great experience in governance. What has Yogi Adityanath proved? That this temple has been built in a very tight timeline so that they could hit January 22nd and get the basics right. And so far, so good. Fingers crossed. Ghee shakkar.
Well, he has driven it, and I think, look, let us not forget that even as the head of the Mahant of the Gorakhpur Mutt, he has been an MP time and again from Gorakhpur. And he's been in parliament for 20 years. So he understands the political process. He understands a good deal of the administrative process. He's been good enough to win the election time and again out of a place which is about half and half Hindu and Muslim. He's done very well. And as an administrator of UP, he has been that good that he is amongst it hasn't happened in I don't know how many decades that a government has won 2 consecutive terms and will probably win a third because he's pretty young. Apart from all this, I was listening to the other panelists, and I must say that, it's common sense business that when you've got 78% belonging to one religion, including a diaspora which is well heeled, to leverage the Hindu religious heritage all over the country has got enormous business potential, enormous earning potential.
Okay.
And it is something that will help to unite the country.
Okay.
The Muslims are welcome.
Yeah. So
the Christians are welcome to leverage their religious sites. But let us remember, the holiest of the holy for both of them lies outside this country.
Okay, so there's also, remember, both Gaya, which is another option. But nowhere we have mentioned or discussed, this is not about the donatives that come. Okay, so these are figures aside from the donatives, because those figures, of course, are going into the temple trust for further maintenance, and I'm hoping extreme charitable activities. But coming back to the point, Himanshu, but
Yes.
in a reasonable estimation, not for a fan, not for a loyalist, but for any reasonable person to say that is Yogi Adityanath in 10 years proved himself, with this being one example of competent administrative and governance capacity and capability.
Yes, I would say so. See, first thing you got to understand is, he's an astute politician. Along with that, he's very pragmatic. And he knows the timeline. He knows to work within the time. The person who doesn't want to work within the time never succeeds. And he's proved himself that he works within the time. You see Yogi Adityanath talking of one district, one product, and how he's trying to propagate that. You see him talking about this whole 250 kilometers corridor and how he's working for that. See, there are umpteen number of examples. You see the investors summit which he held last year. You cannot tell him that he's from mud and so he's naive to administration, he's naive to politics. No, sir. The anti-nationals, let me say that also, because it works here. In Uttar Pradesh, it works here to bring a Bimaru Rajya to in top 3 take some doing. My friend, UP was once called a Bimaru Rajya.
Yes.
To bring it to top 3, you had to remove the obstacles. Well, I'm not going to name them, but we know in last 2 years, there were 2 big obstacles which were removed. Somewhere, some people call him Bulldozer Baba. Be it so. Be it so. But if you do things illegal,
Okay.
you need to be corrected.
Okay, so let me put the caveats out there. The UP is now near the top when it comes to state GDP growth.
Yes.
But when it comes to per capita GDP, remember it has a population of 250 million. So it's
That's
still
India's problem.
it's still low. Okay, so UP is still low. So I'm being fair here. So let me get Monica ji back into this. Monica ji, the question is a very straightforward one. That a Yogi Adityanath, who's become member of parliament, let's say that he became chief minister for the first time as well. But now here we are, 10, 15 years later, and we have examples. There's a massive airport coming up, ladies and gentlemen, in Jewar. That airport is not necessarily just another airport for Delhi. That is being designed as the biggest transshipment air hub probably in Asia, probably in the world. I want you to think about all the FedEx and DHL air fleets being stationed out of locations like this, okay? So this is where air cargo is being transshipped, not just domestic passengers and international passengers. So when it comes to Yogi Adityanath, is he emerging as a person who simply happens to be wearing a saffron robe, but beyond that, he's a competent and credible administrator and governor, or is his claim to fame simply that, listen, I'm a Hindu, I wear saffron, I'm a priest, please vote for me?
I think he is wearing saffron robe, and I think that's the reason for the power that he has. And if you are, and Rishabh, I think you are from media, and you have forgotten to mention one important thing about him, that he's also developing a film city in Noida. And this is not the Sector 16 film city, which is smaller one, but a much larger one, which will have a lot of space, not just for like television, but also like for film production houses. So I think you look around Uttar Pradesh and you just look at the landscape of Uttar Pradesh, how, definitely and how so amazingly he has transformed I come from Uttar Pradesh, my father is from Aligarh, and luckily I had a fortune to travel to Uttar Pradesh in the last 5 years. And if you look at any corner in Uttar Pradesh, talk about the Samsung factory which is coming up in Noida, talk about the film city, the airport that you were mentioning, go to Lucknow. We used to have a house in Lucknow and my mother was very worried about my safety, and I went there. I found out that the police is, right there doing their job. I don't feel that safe in Delhi as much as I do it today in Lucknow. So I think he has fantastically turned around the UP story. And more so as a woman, I'll say, today young children, especially, female students, when they go to college, they go to universities, the law and order record has definitely, is making a lot of girls respect him, a lot of women look up to him and say that this is my leader and he's made it
so you are saying that there is a reasonable claim to fame other than I am Hindu, I wear tika, I wear Bhagwa clothing and I am from a mutt. There is some other claim to fame just other than religious identity. Okay, I'll leave the last word with you.
Rishabh, just a second. Rishabh, you're saying he saffron robe and tika and all that. It's sounding like it's a mistake on his part. See, the thing is, all the symbolism also adds to the man that he is. And I believe, in Hinduism, the entire idea of being a Hindu is to respect women and also create infrastructure so that people are able, people are not vulnerable, they have a chance at some sort of economic growth. So I think
the question is a straightforward one to people watching this who see a Yogi Adityanath. Should you just look at him and say this is a priest, a Hindu man, and that's all that he is, okay? Or is he bringing something other than that to the table? And my question was on administration. A few people say yes, he brings more than that. He brings skills, he brings ability, he brings competence, he brings execution. Deliverability to the table as well. So I'll leave the last word with Yogendra ji. Yogendra ji, other than the religion part of it, that this is a pious and holy site for Hindus and it's the birthplace of Lord Ram and all the historicity of it. In everything else, in getting the building done on time, okay, which is a logistical challenge, okay, because the time was short, in getting smooth operations done, in preventing any law and order situation from occurring, in ensuring that all these visitors who are coming, have a place to sleep and eat, and there has been no great logistical chaos. We are good at that with the Kumbh and others in UP as well. But to prevent all of these situations from coming, in terms of administration, forget the religion for a minute, in terms of administration, have we shown a competent job as a country in administration in the past 4 months?
Absolutely, Rishabh, and I would say that the Yogi government needs to be complimented, specifically the Chief Minister, for his political as well as the business acumen, because he understands it very well that the most important thing that the state of Uttar Pradesh needed was the improvement of the law and order situation, because he understands that once you are able to take control of that, the other resultant factors in the form of private investment, in the form of business confidence, that will come of its own. And that is what we are able to see, that it is all coming as a catalyst now.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, so this is the conversation I intended to have. We've roughly had it. Of course, you can make a judgment call. Nothing like proof of the pudding in the eating. It's imperfect. But for too long, we have lived in a country where we have been used to project execution. Whatever that might be a temple, it might be a mosque, it might be a flyover, it might be a building. Okay, that the project execution is either slipshod, half-hearted, hopelessly delayed, hopelessly messed up, chaotic, things are falling apart, never going to happen, and flyovers that get started never get completed. Now you are seeing things in culmination and being able to make a judge. So I wanted to ask yourself the question that I've asked the guests. Other than the religiosity of it, is there going to be an economic boom for this area in Uttar Pradesh because of the sheer numbers of people coming there and spending their monies? Has there been a competent administration in getting it done in a reasonable time? That time frame might have been for politically convenient purposes, but nonetheless, to get it done in time. In the subsequent 4 months, there are imperfect things, okay? But are we getting large-scale feedback of pandemonium in Ayodhya, high tension, law and order crisis, chaos? Or are we getting no news is good news, that things are pretty calm and people are going in unbelievable record numbers, and that within 4 months, this has become the largest religious tourism site in the world, okay? And then we make a judgment call, because the religiosity matters, but the practicality of its application matters as well. I thank my guests for this conversation.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.